Are you ready for a chilling journey into one of the darkest periods of human history? The Holocaust, a genocide in which over 6 million Jews were systematically murdered by the Nazi regime, is one of the most harrowing events in modern history. And one of the most infamous concentration camps established during that time was Dachau. Do you know what happened at Dachau? Were you aware of the horrific medical experiments conducted on prisoners, or the use of forced labor to contribute to Germany's war effort? And what about the thousands of prisoners who died due to the overcrowding and inhumane conditions? In this video, we will explore the harrowing history of Dachau, from its establishment in 1933 to its liberation in 1945. We will take you to the very depths of human cruelty and suffering, but also one that will remind us of the importance of never forgetting the lessons of history. In September 1939, German forces invaded Poland, which marked the beginning of World War II in Europe. Before this event, the Dachau concentration camp had already been operational for over 6 years, with thousands of people imprisoned there. The Dachau concentration camp was established in March 1933, just weeks after the Nazi Party came to power in Germany. In its first year of operation, the Dachau concentration camp had a capacity of 5,000 prisoners. Initially, the camp held mostly German communists, social democrats, trade unionists, and other individuals who were considered political opponents of the Nazi regime. However, as time passed, other groups were also imprisoned in Dachau, including Jews, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, Romani people, and others who were perceived as a threat to the regime's ideology and power. Those who were imprisoned were typically members of one of the aforementioned groups or individuals who had completed prison sentences after being convicted of violating the Nuremberg laws of 1935. In October 1933, Theodor Eicke, the commander of Dachau, introduced a system of regulations that imposed severe punishments on prisoners for even minor offenses. When Eicke became inspector of the entire German concentration camp system, he ensured that Dachau became the model for all subsequent camps. It also became a training center for SS guards who were sent to work at other camps in the system. In early 1937, the SS began constructing a large complex of buildings on the grounds of the original camp, using prisoner labor. This work began with the demolition of the old munitions factory and continued under terrible conditions. The construction was finished in August 1938, and the camp remained largely unchanged until its liberation in 1945. Thus, Dachau operated for the entire duration of the Third Reich. The Dachau concentration camp consisted of two primary zones, the camp area and the crematoria area. The camp area comprised 32 barracks, among which one was reserved for clergy members who opposed the Nazi regime, and another for medical experimentation. The primary entrance featured a gatehouse that housed the camp administration. In this zone, various support buildings such as the kitchen, laundry, showers, workshops, and a prison block, known as the bunker, were situated. Additionally, the courtyard between the prison and the central kitchen was utilized for the summary execution of prisoners. The entire camp was enclosed by an electrified barbed wire fence, a ditch, and a wall containing 7 guard towers. In 1942, the crematorium area was established adjacent to the main camp. This area consisted of both the old crematorium and the new crematorium, known as Barrack X, which included a gas chamber. However, there's no credible evidence to suggest that the gas chamber in Barrack X was used to murder people. Instead, prisoners were subjected to a process called selection, whereby those who were deemed too ill or too weak to work were transported into the Hartheim Euthanasia Killing Center in Austria. Shockingly, over 2,500 Dachau prisoners were killed in the gas chambers at Hartheim. Moreover, mass executions by shooting occurred in the bunker courtyard and a specially designed SS shooting range, where thousands of Dachau prisoners were killed, including at least 4,000 Soviet prisoners of war after the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941. Several weeks prior, Nazi officials at Buchenwald had forcibly packed more than 3,000 prisoners into 40 train cars in a futile attempt to conceal them from the advancing Allied armies. Although the train was initially scheduled to reach Dachau within a few days, it instead endured a treacherous journey that lasted for 3 weeks due to a range of difficulties. Tragically, only a quarter of the prisoners survived the journey, while the remainder perished due to starvation, dehydration, asphyxiation, and disease. Upon arriving at Dachau, the survivors encountered numerous railway cars filled with the corpses of thousands of other prisoners. By the time Germany invaded Poland, Dachau had become a brutal and inhumane place, where prisoners were subjected to hard labor, starvation, and torture. The onset of the war, however, led to a dramatic escalation in the brutality and violence within the camp. Dachau detainees were subjected to coerced labor, primarily for the operation of the camp, the establishment of small handicraft industries within the camp, and construction projects. They were tasked with various physically demanding activities such as constructing roads, working in gravel pits, and draining marshes. As the war progressed, concentration camp prisoners were increasingly exploited as forced labor, and their contributions became vital to German armaments production. To boost war production during the summer and fall of 1944, satellite camps were set up near armaments factories throughout southern Germany, all of which were under the administration of Dachau. Dachau oversaw approximately 140 subcamps, primarily in southern Bavaria. where detainees worked almost exclusively in armaments factories. Unfortunately, thousands of prisoners were worked to death. The Nazis treated some prisoners at Dachau very cruelly. If they were too weak to work, chronically ill or disabled, they were considered useless and a burden. In July 1941, the Nazis started something called Action 14F13. This was part of a bigger plan called Operation T4, which aimed to secretly kill people with mental and physical disabilities. Hitler ordered Operation T4 in 1939. Over 2,500 prisoners from Dachau were sent to Herdheim Castle in Upper Austria, where they were killed with poisonous gas. Medical staff working for T4 carried out the murders using carbon monoxide gas in gas chambers at Herdheim Castle. In total, 6,000 concentration camp prisoners were killed at Herdheim as part of Action 14F13. Across almost all camps, there was a lack of facilities such as heating, beds, and washrooms. Where these were available, they usually had to be shared between hundreds of prisoners. As a result, disease was common. From 1942, German physicians conducted medical experiments on prisoners at Dachau, with the participation of physicians and scientists from the Luftwaffe and the German Experimental Institute for Aviation. These experiments included high-altitude and hypothermia tests, as well as efforts to develop methods for making seawater drinkable. The experiments were intended to assist German pilots conducting bombing raids or those who crashed into icy waters. Additionally, German scientists noted the effectiveness of pharmaceuticals against diseases such as malaria and tuberculosis. Hundreds of prisoners were killed or injured as a result of these experiments. Over 200,000 prisoners were incarcerated in Dachau from 1933 to 1945, and it is challenging to determine the exact number of deaths that occurred at the camp. Many prisoners brought to the camp for execution were not registered before their deaths, and the number of deaths that occurred during evacuation remains unknown. However, scholars estimate that at least 40,000 prisoners lost their lives at Dachau. As the Allied forces closed in on Germany, German officials started transferring prisoners from concentration camps near the front to avoid the camps and their inmates being captured. These transfers led to a sharp decline in conditions at Dachau, as continuous transports from evacuated camps in the east arrived at the already overcrowded camp. After enduring days of travel with little or no food or water, the prisoners arrived at Dachau in a weakened and exhausted state, often near death. Due to overcrowding, poor sanitation, insufficient provisions, and the weakened state of the prisoners, typhus epidemics broke out and became a significant issue. In April 1945, when American troops were getting close, there were 67,665 prisoners in Dachau and its smaller prisons. Most of them were in the main camp. About 43,350 were political prisoners, and 22,100 were Jewish. As the Allies got closer, at least 25,000 prisoners were forced to walk or were put on trains and taken away from the camps. The Germans killed anyone who couldn't keep walking, and many others died from hunger, cold, or exhaustion. On April 29, 1945, the Americans freed Dachau. They found over 30 train cars full of dead bodies that had been brought to Dachau. In early May, the Americans freed the prisoners who had been forced to march away. Upon encountering the survivors of Dachau, the American soldiers were faced with a haunting sight. The prisoners were mere walking skeletons, and their bodies ravaged by extreme malnourishment and disease. Although the liberators were armed with good intentions, they were unprepared for the immense physical toll that starvation had taken on the prisoners. Despite their best efforts to provide sustenance, the soldiers soon realized that their efforts were in vain. The skeletal prisoners were unable to handle solid food, and tragically, the influx of rations proved fatal for some. The story of Dachau is a dark chapter in human history, but it serves as a stark reminder of the horrors that can occur when hate and prejudice are allowed to run rampant. The liberation of the camp by American forces in 1945 brought an end to the suffering of thousands of prisoners, but the memory of what happened there will live on forever. And with that said, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you in the next video.